Do we have the whole package yet? We don't. You know, the seed is a primary part of the package of making high yields. You know, the varieties, the genetics, you know, and you may say, well, what the hell is this guy doing? Well, my job is to put it in every situation I can to see, one, can I push the genetics and get more yield? But to learn the opposite side of that, I want to know where the limitations are. Why do you think our range, when you look at yield, is between 3,500 and 8,000 pounds in some areas? Different environments, different farming practices, different situations. So we got to learn a little bit about that. When we get seed, it's not just putting that seed in the ground, let's go with it and make the yield, because it's not going to work that easy. Just like the virus, that's part of that package too, trying to protect it. But I put this in 3 different critical periods, just throwing some advice out there, throwing some suggestions. You look at prior to planting, at planting, and after planting. When we're trying to just get a stand and early growth, that's pretty much all I'm pertaining to right now. And it's pretty, like Mark said, this kind of stuff is pretty easy when you look at it on the outside. I know that's not the same for every operation, because it doesn't turn out to be that easy. The first thing is we need the soil sample. And you guys say, well, heck, why is he even saying that? Well, the only reason we keep bringing this up is every year we pick up new ground in some places. I had several people to pick up big farms last year. They took soil samples, but they only looked at pH, NP, or PK, and maybe calcium. They missed out on one thing, was zinc. And some of these farms had high levels of zinc, and when that happened, we get places that have big areas of the field that won't make anything. It kills it. We can't turn it around. Once, it's kind of like anything else. Once you put the seed in the ground, it's done. We won't know about it until it happens, and at that time, we can't correct it. So that's why we kind of harp on that a lot, is take soil samples, especially when you're picking up new ground. Soil prep is another thing that, again, simple. Y'all do that very well. But I often get in places where people try something new. And one thing that last year in one particular place, a guy that went behind corn, and instead of deep turning it like he always had, he went into reduced tillage, didn't have good cleaners on his planter, and we planted seed into a lot of residue and never touched the soil. So we wasted a lot of money there. So just simple things. Again, we got to have that adequate moisture before planting. We had some people, when it got dry last year, said, hey, we got rain potentially coming, I'm going to put it in dry dirt. That is absolutely the wrong thing to do with peanut. You can do that with cotton, you just can't do it with peanut. If Eric Prosco's here, and I don't know if he's here anywhere, but hot dang, we got to start clean. Whether it's reduced tillage or if it's conventional, if we start with weeds growing, we can't back up. We can't clean that up as well. We're going to spend more money. Make sure to check all your equipment. Again, this is simple stuff. And make sure when you pick up seed and it's at your farm, make sure we take care of that seed. You know, put it in the right place. We harped on that several years back. Caleb was part of that. We need to make sure we take care of the seed before we plant it. Let's talk about at planting. Georgia 06, you know, if it was just as easy as you hear in all these high yielding varieties right now, if it was just as easy, let's plant a variety, why are we still 83% of Georgia 06? The one thing that variety does do for us is more flexible in almost all environments than anything that we've seen so far. Now, the new varieties, the reason I do variety trials all over the state is I'm trying to find that flexibility and trying to help out. Know the pros and cons of your varieties. If you're going to try something new, don't go all that way. Let's try to work into it. Make sure you ask all the questions. Know the germ, cold germ, just ask questions. We don't know what we're getting into, but so far it looks pretty good. But if things change, we need to know if those germs change. Look at your seed. My goodness, that sounds kind of interesting, right? Look at your seed. I've seen a lot of people never pay attention when they open a bag. They just throw it in a hopper. And one year, I think it was 2020, we put a lot of shriveled up black seed in a hopper that never would have come up. So that's some things that we need to pay attention to. This is some of the seed. One thing that we see sometimes is what? Splits. Sometimes we can get a lot of splits. And in that situation, if that's all we got and it can't be cleaned up, we know we got to bump the seeding rates a little bit. to make sure we get a good stand. So things to think about. Soil temperature, big deal. I talked about that earlier. 68 degrees in the top 4 inches for at least 4 days with no, when you plant them, you don't want the next week to get very cold. That's the one thing we want to get away from, is trying to plant in bad conditions. And if we turned out to have some problems with vigor, we don't need to do that. And then moisture, like you guys know, and planting speed, seed depth, all those things matter. So it is a complete package. Know a little bit about your varieties. I mention this a lot. And one thing that we do with all of our trials is we start to pick out certain things that each variety has wrong or that can get in trouble. 09B's been around a long time. We know it's pretty susceptible to leaf spot, and we know it gets mature about 135 days. It's a variety that when it gets mature, you hopefully need to be in the field getting it out. I talked to a lot of people that, we talked to people in other states, and that was one that went to Arkansas, and they were planting 2,000 acres within a 2-week window, and they left a lot of peanuts in the field because they could not get it out of the field. So make sure you know that. 12Y. Hey, we've had that thing for quite a long time now. We're just learning how to make that one work. It takes a lot sometimes to get the management practices right for this variety. We got a lot of people planting it beyond May 10th or 12th. It hurts the yield in that if you plant it late. Know about the Rhizoctonia limrod. It will hurt your yield also. If you stay with a good program, that's not a problem. 16HO, again, if you plant it late, it will get a little bit of leaf spot problem. It's one that's got good tomato spotted wilt, so you could plant it a little early. We have seen it shed a little bit in conditions where we get wet late in the season. Not bad, but it will shed a little bit. 18RU, that's one that, boy, if we get the right conditions, it will yield and it will grade better than 06. Problem is do not plant that before May 10th or 12th. Tomato spotted wilt virus will get on it earlier, and get on it worse than 06. So don't plant it early if you can. 20VHO, that is a new variety. I like this variety. The growth habit is awesome. It is a little bit better on the virus, a little bit better on leaf spot a little bit. Problem is that if we have wet conditions late in the season, and I'm talking about the last third or last quarter of the season, and it's prolonged wet periods, we're going to shed, and we're going to shed a lot. And so that is a risk of that variety. And it's not because it's over mature, and it's not because of a nematode problem or anything like that. It just for some reason has a risk problem, a stress mechanism that will cause it to shed. So just be curious about that. Plant it in good drain soils. Don't plant it in low-lying areas if you're going to plant it. You'll like it if we have typical season, but if we get wet, that's the one that worries me. And then use Peanut RX. We talked a lot about that. One of the last things, apply inoculants. I have a lot of questions about that all the time. I'm very high on inoculants because if we mess up and get in a place that hadn't had peanuts in a while, you have a stopped up tube, you don't put it out, we get into problems. It's going to cost you more money in nitrogen. If you do have a problem, you don't need more than 60 units of nitrogen. That'll take care of it. Do we need all that extra stuff in fur with the inoculants? We've not really seen consistency there. The one big no-no is do not put any fertilizer of any kind in there with the seed at planting. No matter what we do, we have shown that across 5 states and across 2 years worth of data, more than probably about 15 trials now, that this is a detriment to the situation. The black bar is no fertilizer in furrow. And I know we got riser here, but it is any fertilizer in furrow. We do not want it to go in furrow. We've tested other products. That's a half gallon, 1, 2, and 3. We got people that say, well, we might do a 1 or a half. It still slows our emergence down about 2 to 3 days. And what does that do for us, especially early? Tomato spotted wilt virus. So be aware of that. That is something we need to eliminate. Do all you want to once it comes up, but this is something we need to get out of doing. It doesn't help us on yield either. And then after we plant, again, this is very similar. We need to get Valor on as quick as we can. We know we're going to see some problems. We can't ever predict when we're going to have issues. It'll come out of it most of the time. And so we need to do that, but if we irrigate right after and apply it right after, we're doing good. One thing I've seen in the past, even on irrigated in dry conditions, if we're hot in May and we're planting, if you plant, I think this was 2 years ago, we planted some, or I had a grower that planted some in an irrigated field, and he kept planting and went on. Well, and then I got a call that had very sporadic stands, pretty much not a good stand at all. And it was all because he had good moisture when he left the field, but in 2 to 3 days, it was so hot it dried out. And so we need to be back in there irrigating and or checking stands. We need to make sure that if we got a stand problem, we can get it replanted within 21 days at the most.